Welcome to Costly Conversations. I'm excited to have Al or Alex from Armed Black Movement on the screen with us today. Super excited. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time as we talk through a few different things. Just a quick reminder to everybody who's watching, you may not be subscribed, or if YouTube did something funny, you may be unsubscribed. Go ahead and just check the little subscriber thing. Make sure you're subscribed. It really helps us out. Like the video, leave a comment. If you have questions, we'll have a little question and answer section afterwards, so stick around for that. Now, back to you, Al. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we wanted to talk through a couple different things tonight. I know with you and your platform and the movement that you're part of, it's interesting. There's a lot to it, but yet there's certain things that are very simple. I'm curious to kind of hear a little bit about you, a little bit about like why you got started with the company, and what you plan to accomplish with it.
Okay. So initially it wasn't really a plan. It was really just a desire to network with other Black folk that took this, their right to bear arms and self-defense serious. So when I moved to Delaware in 2010, I became a legal gun owner. I saw how easy it was to legally purchase guns here. And I mean easy meaning go through the proper channels. Whereas opposed to, New Jersey, we had to have a permit just to purchase a handgun. Basically a redundant process, which is essentially a barrier to entry. And then I noticed after I started getting into it, taking a couple classes and really taking it, from a proactive perspective, I noticed that I never saw anyone that looked like me, whether it be the gun store, the range, there just was no Black people around. And I'm like, wow, that's concerning, because when you turn on the TV, we're the ones who are essentially being hunted, being attacked and being, having all the violent acts committed against us. So we're the ones that should be in the gun ranges, in these gun classes, in the gun store. So I said, okay. So I got on Instagram, and I was completely against social media. And I still, think social media is kind of weird, but I said, I want to know that there's other people out there that's doing this, such as myself. So I created a page just wanting to network with other instructors, other people that were just proactively training themselves. And then it kind of grew. And I started to casually teach people or take people to the range when they came to visit me. And then it became sort of like a calling. When my son was born, that's when something like clicked, right? So my son was born. I started to really take, self-defense and defending my family serious. It became a job, not just something that I felt like I should be doing because I was a man, this, that, and the third. I felt the obligation to it. Not only did I feel an obligation to it, I felt the obligation to share the knowledge that I was gaining and spread the word and encourage other people to do it. So that's where the page Armed Black Movement came from. I said, understanding our history and understanding that firearms and self-defense was part of our culture, globally and also in this country. And I seek to get back to that, like being proactive about your self-defense and firearm ownership needs to be a cultural pillar. It needs to be just as common as the potato salad at the cookout. Okay, everybody needs to be armed and trained, and it's something that I believe we were tricked out of. One of my mentors made a point about the crack era, where I thought about growing up in the 80s, how all the fathers in my neighborhood, I grew up in the North New Jersey area, all the fathers in my neighborhood, they had firearms. And it was kind of common. They all migrated north from the South. And so firearms was culturally something that we did. And it was like when the crack era hit, the violence that was associated with the crack kind of got linked back to firearms, and then firearms became taboo in the Black community. That's a theory that was put out there that makes a lot of sense, because after that era, guns in the homes of the fathers and the people that I knew, it kind of became like hush hush. You really didn't hear about it. It wasn't as commonplace and people didn't talk about it. So it was almost like we were tricked out of being proactive about self-defense. And we're the only ones that do that. We're the only ones that have to say, oh, you own a gun? Oh, yeah, I didn't know you owned a gun. It's like, it's a secret. It's hush hush, right?
Oh, my gosh.
Like,
no, I've heard that before. That's why I'm laughing. Yeah, that's why
right.
I'm laughing. I've heard that.
And it's like, no, like this is something, number one, I believe in God's law. I'm governed by God's law. I don't believe man can write law. I believe that you can write policy to try to, deter people from doing things. But essentially, I'm governed by the principles of Ma'at. And so as God's law, I have the right to defend myself. Once you are given breath, you are given the right to defend that breath. And so that's where, the right to bear arms comes in. But even without that document, I still believe in the right to defend yourself. So it became like a calling. I felt I would get like direct messages from the ancestors saying like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. You have to spread this word. You have to spread this to the community. So Armed Black Movement is basically my contribution to the community. I do a lot for free. I have a business, civilian self-defense concepts and principles, but Armed Black Movement is my movement. It's my contribution to the community. And I do a lot on my own dime. I do a lot for free time. I interact with people on a daily basis. I take people to the range. If I can introduce someone, especially the sisters out there, to a lesson and just give my time, then I do that because typically it results in them coming back. So sacrificing a little bit of my time to have a sister proactively take up self-defense, to me is worth it. So that's where it came from. It came from the desire to network, spread the word, and now it's basically a movement. I tell people it's not about me. The movement is the people. So I'm just kind of the messenger and the motivator and the one that keeps people focused on this. But the movement is the people, and the people they're doing it. Like they're out there, they get involved.
Yeah, you're right. And on a quick note, I know you said you take a lot of pride in introducing women to firearms and making sure that they're well equipped with that knowledge and ability, and of course, just that practical hands-on time with a firearm. A lot of the really awesome women in the firearms game point to you and say like, "Yo, he's the guy." Like, if you need to know. So definitely thank you for that. Thank you for being a part of that and being a part of that legacy of women in firearms and making sure that they understand their role and understand that it's on them too. It's not just, the man is the protector, and that's all great. That's all fine and good. I love to feel like I can protect my wife, but at the end of the day, if she can't handle herself in a situation, or if I need help, it's no good. So
you're not going to always be around, and it's the sleeper, right? Mm-hmm. If you approach together, the assumption is going to be that you're the threat. Mm. So for her to be able to provide that element of surprise, I always tell people it's not his job or her job. It's the family's job to proactively be prepared to ward off a violent attack. Absolutely. It's simple as that.
Yeah. And I think lately on social media, we've been seeing a lot of weird videos of this guy coming up and robbing a girl as soon as she's walking in her house, or that guy creeping up on a doorstep, drugged out of his mind or just completely insane, talking about he wants to basically pillage the house and attack the woman inside, using explicit vocabulary to talk about what he's going to do. And so, like, I don't have time. I don't always have time to drive across town and check on the house if I see somebody on my cameras. Like,
right.
Well, I need to know that the people inside my house are okay, whether I'm there or not, and I will get there as soon as I can. So it's a good point you bring up, and this was kind of like a shock therapy to my wife when I was married. How I had to basically teach her about being aware and proactive about protecting your space, and it needs to be part of your lifestyle. So like, I don't carry a firearm because I'm being disciplined or because I feel some obligation. It's because it's part of my lifestyle. Just like I wake up and brush my teeth and care for myself. All the things that I do, I'm not being disciplined. It's part of my lifestyle. So we have to embrace self-defense as part of our lifestyle. And it becomes natural and it becomes instinctful, especially when we have children. When you have a family, you have people who not only can they not act on their behalf, they're not even aware of what's out there. Like that was the scary awakening for me as a parent. It's like, not only can they not defend themselves, they don't even know the evil that's out there. Like that thought alone is just frightening. They have no idea what's out there. So you have to be in a position to act on their behalf. Right. They don't know what trouble looks like. Not most of the time. No, you're absolutely right about that. And I think just kind of back on the point of like discipline, or not even a discipline thing, but it being just as part of your lifestyle. I think it's interesting that most people unless they completely forget. Most people don't leave their house without their cell phone. And we can say, well, because you want to be able to be reached in case of an emergency, check. If something's going on with your kids, you got to be able to be reached, check. You need to be able to communicate with people on a leisure level. I'm like, okay, well, why would you leave your house? I mean, unless you are not able to, without your firearm, especially with your family.
Right. And especially with your family. And that's always my biggest concern is when I'm with my family. I'm pretty confident that I wouldn't have to use a firearm when I'm out by myself unless I was acting on someone else's behalf, because just how I move and how I operate. But when you're talking about securing space for multiple people, some who can't even run. I can't fathom that. Why would you leave your house without the firearm? Because for me, I've left my house without my cell phone, but I usually turn around without my firearms. Like, okay, I guess I'll just have to get my phone. I come back with my firearm, especially when I'm with my family. I don't leave my house without it.
Right. And some people, they got different rules. They got different scenarios. I'm like, okay, well, like when some people buy a gun and it's only for the house. Some people buy guns and it's like, well, it's my truck gun or it's my car gun. What's your philosophy on that? Because I know for yourself, you like to carry on body, I assume. But what do you think when you have students come in and they're like, oh, I have this, but it's really just for the house, or maybe for the student that's only kept it in the house up until now? Like, what do you kind of say to them?
So I don't really have any philosophy on, tool selection, setup. Everything is going to be unique based on you as an individual. How I approach self-defense with firearms is fluid. Okay, so I have a gun that I keep in the house primarily as the house gun because it's bigger. But I do carry it at times. If I'm out at certain times at night, like if I'm at the gun club late and I want a big full-size duty gun on me with a light, I'll take that gun. But it's not a house gun because it's restricted to the house. It's because it's my biggest pistol, and concealed carry and a bigger pistol isn't necessarily the way to go. Right. So it's still a size, but it's still part of a system. So I have a system of firearms that I use that work within basically the concept of being minimal and simplistic. So my primary carry gun is a Glock 19. And then second to that is a Glock 45. Well, they're the same gun in terms of the slide. It's just a grip that's a different size. The Glock 45 has a larger grip, both chambered in 9mm, and they both can take the Glock 45 mags. The Glock 45 can't take the Glock 19 mags. The biggest thing is that they both share holsters, so they can fit the same holster. So I have one holster for basically 3 guns, those 2 guns, and then the 22 version of the 19, which is basically my training pistol. And
the Glock 44?
Size. Glock 44, correct.
Okay, yeah.
All 3 of those guns fit the same holster. In addition to that, I have one light bearing holster that's specific to the light. So it's a light bearing holster that fits the light, not the gun. So any gun that I put that light on, it's going to fit. So I have 2 holsters for basically 3 guns, whether I'm training or concealed carry. And so it's any of those guns can be the house gun except for the 44, but both of those guns can be the house gun. Both of those guns I conceal carry. So it's not that it's not ideal or I can't utilize it for the house or for concealed carry. It's fluid. And I tell people concealed carry doesn't stop when you enter the home. So your concealed carry tools, you're probably going to have to want to use it in and around the house. So it's not like I'm home, I'm off, put the concealed carry stuff away. It's just an extension. You just have a barrier between you and the people that are outside. It's not that you don't necessarily need those tools. So
people can kick in your door in just a few seconds.
Exactly.
It's quick.
That's kind of my pistol approach. And I do carry a Glock 48 as well for like lighter duty or when I'm out and about with the kids and stuff. I have a AR pistol that I'll keep with me when I'm on the go. That's like my go gun. I set it up to be on the go, and I can take it with me as I need to, because sometimes I just feel like I want to have an AR. Sometimes I feel like I want to have the AR with. I feel like you should always have access to a rifle, just for its efficiency. So that's kind of my setup. Philosophies, I think that you have to just train. If you're able to act efficiently, the way you're set up with the tools that you have, I think that's what determines if it's a good idea or not. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They conceptualize something, they don't really get to train or pressure test it, and then that's what they said is the reality of the situation. And a lot of times people find out the hard way that that's not how it works, because you never know how it's going to happen. I had a situation where, I lived in a fairly decent neighborhood in Bear, Delaware, and I found myself, being robbed or trying to be robbed at 2 a.m. And that was the furthest thing from my mind, living in that neighborhood. But because I was prepared, and there's never any days off. So it's not like I'm home or I'm in a good neighborhood. You always still have to move with the same diligence. And it was because of that I was able to act and basically shut it down. So it's good. You just have to be prepared at all times.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Now, I like what you said. There's certain things that we like conceptualize, but we never pressure test it. And at the end of the day, if you never tested it, if you never trained with it, if you never actually practiced, then how do you know that you'll be okay? Even just, I went paintballing last weekend, and there's certain elements of doing something as simple as paintballing, like utilizing your cover, moving and shooting, stuff like that. Just understanding your sight lines, and there's certain things like those, practices, or even just going into just something more simple, just going to the range, going to an outdoor range or a range where you can move around a little bit and actually try things, drawing from your holster, certain things like that. If you never actually test it, how will you know that you will actually perform in a time where you're stressed, in a time where your adrenaline's pumping, your hands are shaky, your voice is weak? How will you know?
You do know. You know that you will not perform, and if you don't understand that, then that's unfortunate. Your brain doesn't like unfamiliar stimuli. Like that was the message that I got from this combative pistol class that I took this weekend, and he really drove home what it's like, or the concept of being prepared for a gunfight. And when you're talking about the training that you're talking about, if your brain hasn't experienced it, when it's introduced to it, it's going to stop to try to figure out what the response should be. Mm-hmm. And so if you're talking about somebody who goes out, purchases a firearm, doesn't do any extensive training, and now finds themselves in a situation, that situation is going to cause them to pause and say, wait a minute, what do I do now? Because they haven't prepared for it in any way, shape, or form. Your brain doesn't like unfamiliar stimuli. It's going to stop to try to figure out, okay, this is new. What's the response?
Wow.
And that's the difference. Like I've seen, and this is amazing, I've seen a grown man get punched in the face and stop and just like, and it's like, dude, like you just got punched in the face, like respond. And it was because he clearly hadn't been inoculated to violence or had that experience before. And so he didn't know how to react.
Right.
And that's what people don't understand. When you talk about somebody trying to kill you, because if you use a gun, that's what's going on. Somebody's trying to kill you. It's not, you're in a road rage situation where somebody's trying to maybe take your parking spot. Somebody's trying to take your life. So when somebody's trying to kill you, if you haven't prepared or thought about how you will respond or practice how you're going to respond, guess what's going to happen? You are not going to respond properly. And the time that you take to figure out, number one, that something is happening to you, and that you need to do something, that 1 to 3 seconds usually costs people their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just talking to a cat who runs Starting Point Defense, and he kind of ran me through some scenarios that he had been in personally, and it was amazing to see that, that little bit of practice that he had saved his life in many situations, or at least helped him to overcome the challenges that he was faced with. I'm actually also, based on what you were saying, reminded of my time when I was more regularly practicing Krav Maga, and that they would run us through different drills where it was very intense, designed to basically activate our adrenaline, get us going, so that if and when we faced certain situations, we would be able to have that muscle memory built in, because your fine motor skills are going away. You can't do what you would do, but you can do something. So that's interesting to me.
So let's talk about that. Couple of things I wanted to touch on. I want to make sure that people understand the difference between just pure adrenaline and then the chemicals that are released with the fight or flight process. Because I see a lot of people do training where they'll have someone do some, what do you call those? Burpees, push-ups, running, sprinting, and then pick up the gun and shoot and say, you know, that's preparing you for the adrenaline. No, that is not in any way, shape, or form what it's like when somebody's trying to kill you. What you experience from fatigue when you run up and down a field or you do burpees and push-ups, that's just fatigue. That's not what it feels like when someone is trying to kill you. And I had this conversation with a student that told me about this tactical class they took. Like, yeah, they had us running and doing push-ups. I said, what does that have to do with a gunfight? I said, none of that feeling that you had that when you were tired and trying to focus and shoot that gun, that is not how it feels like when someone is trying to kill you. So he didn't replicate that. You can't replicate that. The fight or flight process and being fatigued from muscle fatigue and adrenaline is not the same thing. Now, the only way you could really replicate that is force on force. That's going to get you the closest to that. Actually having someone with another firearm that shoots projectiles shooting at you and doing drills and scenarios that way. That's probably the best way to replicate somebody trying to kill you, somebody actually using tools that as close as possible to try to kill you without actually harming you. So force on force. Exercising and shooting a gun has nothing to do with you being prepared for a violent encounter. It just means you have the ability to overcome a little bit of muscle fatigue and still shoot.
Which is also important. I don't want to diminish.
It is important, but it is not. It has nothing to do with what you're going to have to overcome, especially since most gunfights is about 3 to 5 seconds. Like your muscles are not going to get fatigued. You're not even going to have time to experience the adrenaline until after it's over. Like it happens so fast. Yeah. So you don't need to be in shape for a gunfight. You could be the fattest, sloppiest, worst heart condition, high cholesterol. It's going to be 3 to 5 seconds. Now you might have a heart attack because you can't, what you have to deal with afterwards, but you don't need to be in shape because it's going to happen so fast.
Yeah.
So that's something that I want to make sure people understand. Yes, you should always be in the top physical condition that you could be in. Exercising is part of my lifestyle. I definitely believe that you should be in shape. I wanted to make sure that people understand that. And that's so important. Repetition, you mentioned muscle memory, or just kind of programming things into your I forgot what it's called. I'm drawing a blank with the technical term. Your cerebral pathways basically is what the term is. When you do something over and over, your brain kind of documents it as being important, and so you can do it more efficiently without thinking. Like the things that you do when you drive, you don't have to think about what the blinker is when you want to put a blinker on. You just put your finger out and click it because you've done it so many times. It's part of your automated process. So you want to build things into your automated process. And I read an article that helped to really put that into perspective, and I use this in class. When I first got my license, I would get a lot of tickets. And that's because I was unfamiliar with cops sitting on the side of the road just waiting for people to speed. And so getting used to that meant that I recognized the cop when it was too late. Experiencing that enough times, I'm now programmed 20 plus years later that if I see a car sitting up ahead that even remotely resembles a police car, I instinctively take my foot off the gas. And then I consciously assess if it's a cop. Glad I slowed down. Oh, no, that's not a cop. Go ahead and keep going. That's the conscious part. But I subconsciously, without thinking, take my foot off the gas. So when you train and you practice certain things, you build certain things into your subconscious and to your automated process. We're governed by our automated processes. We don't really stop and think about doing a lot of things on a daily basis. When you wake up, you go to the bathroom, you brush your teeth. You don't have to consciously think about these things because you've done them over and over, and the repetition is built into your automated processes. So the guy that got punched in the face and stood there and froze, clearly he hadn't experienced violence.
Right.
Because he didn't know how to respond. He didn't even know what he was dealing with. Where someone who is, experienced with violence is probably going to respond immediately or be the initiator. So it's building things into your automated response because that's what we're governed by. We don't really consciously do a lot on a daily basis. We're governed by our subconscious, and that's what your training does. Your training should put you in a position so that you don't have to shoot anyone.
Yeah.
Your training should put you in a position. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The instance that I had in front of my house, my training saved his life. My training didn't save my life.
Ooh.
Had I not been as trained as I was, maybe 3 years before that, I would have drawn my gun and instinctively shot him, as opposed to drawing my gun, having him retreat his draw, going to the low ready, and then giving him command and giving him the opportunity to make a better decision, get a second chance. And it was me paying attention to what was going on, watching the situation evolve, and before he act, I got to jump on him. So all of that was my training. It wasn't because I can shoot a gun well. It's because I've trained and conditioned myself to be able to identify predators and to respond in time so that you can stop them, because that's what it's about. It's about time. When you talk about self-defense, time is critical.
Yeah, time is of the essence. I remember something earlier that you said. Adrenaline feels different than those I believe it's 3 chemicals that rush through your body basically instantly when you're faced with fear and death. And it's interesting because there's moments in my life where I felt truly afraid, and you get some interesting sensations. Like you
Right.
might taste metal, or just you instantly things just don't feel right. Your head feels like it's about to explode, or however you experience it. And I think that's one of those things that you're right. It's truly hard to replicate something like that, except for being threatened with pain and some form of violence, like a force on
Right.
force, using actual projectiles, hearing things coming for you, like something as simple as a little bit of paintball when you're standing behind a sheet of metal and all you hear is bang, 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 bang. They're coming for you. There's a
Right.
little bit of fear in that. It's not the same because it's not going to kill you. It's not the same, but a little bit of fear in that. Just kind of maybe moving back into what we were talking about earlier with there are certain practices that you just have to get down, and your training actually saving the guy who tried to rob you. It's as if training with firearms is almost like training like a martial art. And I know that's something that you've been kind of really big on is that those kinds of disciplines. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So yeah, started having a conversation with my sensei probably about 5 years ago, and then my mentor put it into perspective as well. Whereas using a firearm, in this case we're talking about pistols primarily, but using a firearm for self-defense is in fact a martial science. It's a martial art, and I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong. If you look at any martial art and how it's approached in a crawl, walk, run process where you have to learn the bare basics. You have to learn the art, its origin, any tools associated with it. Then you start conditioning your mind and your body to learn the art. Then you start learning bits and pieces of it. You might learn punches, you might learn kicks, you might learn how to fall, how to throw. Then you start learning how to put it together. Then you might start sparring, and then that's when you start competing. And if that process that I just described is probably over a year, right, for new people. Mm-hmm. It's no different with a firearm. You can't go from purchasing a gun to wanting to take tactical training. And the class that I took this weekend really put that into perspective. It was a 2-day combative pistol class. And when I say the class really focused on basic fundamentals and then put them into a perspective of how to use them to fight, it's almost like the simplest things are the most complex when you talk about fundamentals, especially when you talk about a pistol and how difficult it is to shoot it efficiently. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people really shy away from the basic fundamentals and start moving to other things that are only going to cause a situation to crumble because your fundamentals aren't solid. Mm. So you have to approach using a firearm as a martial art. You're a white belt. You purchase that gun, you're a white belt, okay? And only black belts fight. So while you're a yellow, green, brown, all of those other belts, you really shouldn't be trying to fight. And we're talking about roughly 150 to 200 training hours until you can become efficient or become a black belt. But what you have people do, including myself, I don't speak from a position of error without error. When I bought a gun and got my concealed carry permit, I was walking around with a gun and trained. Everybody does it. Thankfully, I didn't get tested. So I was fortunate enough, like most people are, to not be tested because I wasn't prepared. And I didn't understand that. It's like, you don't know what you don't know. Right. But I wasn't prepared. But you need to I think everybody should take the class I took this weekend before they conceal carry.
Yeah.
And most people don't even take a concealed carry class if their state doesn't require it. They don't take these classes.
Yeah.
If your state doesn't require concealed carry, most people don't take training. Most people get a gun. They may take a lesson. They may go to they may take a basic pistol class, but they don't do the training that's necessary to be able to fight with the gun.
What makes the training class that you went to so unique or special? Is it the level of proficiency that you need to actually even be at the class, or what are you getting at?
So I looked at it two ways. I had to really make sure I focused on the class as a student, because as an instructor, I was just wowed by how the content was delivered. But I'm like, you know what? I don't want to focus on that. So as a student, what it did for me was it made it real simple how nasty and violent people can be. Okay. Yeah. And how efficient you have to be to deal with them. And there is no rhyme or reason for it. A lot of people get caught up in what happened. It doesn't matter. Someone's trying to kill you, and you need to be very nasty and efficient with stopping them. Mm-hmm. And this class basically just, addressed the skills that's necessary for that, which is being able to essentially get your gun out of your holster as fast as you can and put shots on the threat as fast as you can under stress. And I know that's very general, but he did a good job at putting that into perspective and also pressure testing it as much as you can without having someone shoot at you. And so for me, as somebody who already had a lot of these concepts in my brain, they were because of my path that I've walked,
right?
Not because of training. And so for him to be able to deliver that same perspective from being in a class versus somebody having all of these experience that I had, I thought that was pretty fascinating.
What's the name of that class again, for maybe someone who wants to look into it?
The company is called Range Master. Range Master is owned by an old white guy named Tom Givens. And if you are anybody in terms of, defensive pistol, really good with fighting with the pistol, you probably come through a Range Master class. And a 71-year-old guy, I believe, and he still can execute everything that he was teaching.
Excellent.
Very sharp. And just like I said, the way he delivers the content, I learned a lot about how to teach. And I learned a lot about addressing the things that I deal with new shooters, basically new shooters that don't really understand what it means to use a tool to fight with. Also might not understand really how they fit in to using that tool for self-defense. Like, I really don't do certain things and I don't be in these places. So but I feel like I should have a gun. And so this class was really great for people. So no, you don't really need a certain skill level to take the class. You need to be very proficient from a safety perspective. And I think anybody can get something out of the class. There were people in the class that, it spanned the spectrum. You had people who were highly skilled, people who were less skilled. But everybody was on basically the same level in terms of safety. So when you have that being the case, you don't have an issue with the class. But yeah, it was a very intense class, 2-day class, shot about 500 to 600 rounds, purposeful rounds. I must say they were purposeful rounds. I was kind of curious about going in with the high round count would look like.
Yeah, that's a very high round count for me.
But it was very thorough and purposeful, definitely. By the time I left there yesterday, I was a much better shooter, and I felt like I was much better prepared to fight with my gun. And I had a lot that I took from that class I want to teach people. So my next concealed carry class is going to be off the hook. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, concealed carry classes are kind of interesting, and I'll probably we'll go ahead and ask you about that real quick, and we'll hop into some other topics. But I don't know, we talked about concealed carry classes and how if your state doesn't require it, you probably didn't even take it, but you need to be at a certain level before you can even really feel comfortable carrying a gun on an everyday basis. And there's a lot to unpack there. Like, do you believe that people should just not carry guns? Or, people are going to get mad even hearing even the thought of that. that said, do you feel like concealed carry classes even do remotely enough to address new shooter skills? There's some people take a concealed carry class before they even have a gun.
Right. So that's a great question. That's probably the most relevant topic that I deal with because I'm in Delaware. We have a requirement. So to get your concealed carry permit, you have to take a class. And I struggled with this at first because of how I was taught. I was taught from that martial art perspective. You have to be proficient in the prior levels in order to proceed. Mm-hmm. So when you say, hey, I want to get a gun and I want to get my concealed carry permit, time out. There's a lot that needs to happen from I want to get a gun to I want to get my concealed carry permit. So what I saw was, and this happened when I got my permit, my class was all of 3 hours, maybe 4 hours if you include the range time. And I don't really remember the range time. I do remember going to the range shooting with the guy, but I don't remember shooting more than like 10 shots, honestly. It's that vague. And I didn't learn anything. He basically read through the laws, which I could have gone and pulled up myself, and that was it. I don't remember getting any solid content. So I refuse to do that, number one. Number two, I'm a practitioner, so I don't even have it in me. Like, I conceal carry. I teach from a lifestyle perspective. I'm not just an instructor that is seeking to make money and teaching people. I teach the lifestyle that I live, and that's what makes it so easy. So what I did was, because I was getting these new shooters wanting to get their concealed carry permit, I essentially started teaching a 2-day class where the first day was basic pistol and then the second day was a concealed carry. Wow. And that was just too time consuming. So then I kind of condensed it, took the basic necessities out of the basic pistol class and incorporated basically a 2-part class. And that's what we have now. So the first half of my class is basic pistol. So that focused on really 3 subject areas. We focus on engineering of the pistol, the physics of what's happening, and then understanding the meditation that's required to shoot the pistol efficiently, right? That's the first half class. Then we take a break, and then we come back after lunch. We get into the concealed carry class. So the NRA has a great curriculum, a concealed carry curriculum, and I teach the first 3 lessons of that curriculum in my class. And then we go into the Delaware stuff, which is about an hour or so. Now, I tell people from like Pennsylvania and Maryland, I actually had a sister from Maryland take my class. There's only about an hour of the class that's specific to Delaware. And it's still relevant to discuss because you're still going to have, those things top of mind in your state. But I teach the class that way because I can't have students that haven't been exposed to the basics of pistol handling come and sit in my concealed carry class because they're going to fail. You have to shoot 100 rounds in Delaware. And for me, you don't just come and shoot 100 rounds. You have to display a certain proficiency based off of what I teach and what I'm expecting to see. So I need to be able to have you pass the qual. You need to show some proficiency in the intro to defensive pistol shooting skills that I teach in the class. And so teaching a basic pistol first, that allows me to get most students to that point fairly quickly. So my class is a fully loaded class from basic pistol all the way up through the concealed carry stuff.
Wow.
So it's
about How long does that
10
take?
hours.
You say
about 8 to 10 hours.
In one day?
In one day, yeah. And I've never had a person about the class because, like I said, I teach from a practitioner's perspective. So the second half, the concealed carry class, is all psychology. Like the technical stuff is over, the tools are away. We're talking about what's actually going to happen and how you need to be equipped mentally to be able to fight with a gun. And what does fight with a gun mean? To kill someone. That's what the gun is for, right? It's a lethal force tool. And we need to understand that, okay? Why do you carry a gun? Because you're going to need to potentially shoot someone. That's the simple fact of it. And so preparing people for that, and there's a huge ethical discussion we have. Most people don't ask themselves, can I kill someone? Can I take a life? And we have this discussion in my class. We talk about being ethically responsible with the firearm. Another thing that I take from one of my mentors is when you put a gun on your person, you lose the right to defend your honor. You cannot use that gun to defend your honor. The gun can only be used to defend your life or that of someone that you love. If you use your gun to defend your honor, you're going to find yourself dead or in jail. It's the simple fact of it. So it's a lethal force tool, and it's a last resort tool. And when you leave my class, you understand the burden of that responsibility, because it is a burden of responsibility. You have to approach it as a responsibility. Okay. You have to be very proactive about knowing the legalities associated with owning a gun and using it in lethal force situation, because it's a very gray area. It's not someone did this, you have a gun, you have this license, you can shoot them. They do this. It's not like a flow chart. It's not that simple. It's very gray.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, I tell people to stop using the term justified shooting. There's no such thing as a justified shooting. You're going to have a situation, God forbid, where you're going to have to use your firearm for self-defense. And then you're going to articulate why you did what you did based on your understanding of the law. And then the process will play out.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not justified. When you shoot someone, it's not a justified shooting. You're acting on your behalf, and you need to articulate what you did and let the process play out.
Wow, that's deep, because most people don't explain it like that. Although in the previous interview, we ended up discussing self-defense shootings and something that actually went down. And I think fortunately the individual, the Starting Point Defense, the owner of that, he was able to articulate in court over a 6-month period at multiple court dates where he multiple times he had to take the stand and argue his case. He was able to, but I wonder if it was any less cut and dry the times that he had to defend his life and actually ending up taking a life. If it was any less cut and dry, would he be in jail? And I wonder if things like self-defense insurance or those things, if you feel like there's any relevancy to them in what we do, just because you're carrying a firearm because you potentially would have to take a life, stopping whatever threat is in front of you can and may end up killing that threat. It's right. The high likelihood, especially when you carry self-defense rounds.
Right. I do believe that self-defense insurance is relevant. I believe that it's part of your toolkit. You know, it's something that you have as a tool should you have an emergency or self-defense situation. And it's not primary, of course, but it's for the aftermath. You have tools before, during, and after. This is one of the after tools, right? And so I use a company called the Armed Citizens Defense Network. And I like that company because, you know, the two companies out there that people primarily know are USCCA, the Armed Citizens Defense Network, and there's another one that I had.
I know U.S. Law Shield is pretty.
U.S. Law Shield, and there was one more. It'll come back to me. But I like the Armed Citizens Defense Network because they have probably some of the best people on their board advising. Okay. They have people on their board that have been in the game and have been in situations that have a history and a background that actually contributes to the product. But nonetheless, they're all the same. They all provide the same service. One, you know, I think the USCCA, what they do better than anyone else's market. They don't necessarily have a better product. They have basically the same
and
product.
That's the game.
And a ton of marketing.
Yeah.
And I think that they pander to the Black community, which, you know, I take issue with that. But it's pretty much the same product. But that's the company that I use. I use the Armed Citizens Defense Network.
I do want to touch on that for a second, not because I want to tear anybody down, but I do want to explore what you just said, that you said you do feel like they pander to the Black community a little bit. And I've seen them call up and, you know, recruit different Black influencer types. And I do wonder if that's what you're talking about, or if you've seen something else that you've taken exception to. And hopefully we can digest something from that statement.
So it's simple. I don't have any specific instance that I would share in terms of, you know, something that specifically happened. It's just overall. Sure. I think that just put into perspective, who is USCCA? USCCA, they were an insurance company. They essentially was their primary product was self-defense insurance. And I believe maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they developed a curriculum. And I'm USCCA certified. I went and got my instructor certification almost 2 years ago.
And NRA certified.
Yeah, I was NRA first. I was NRA certified first. And I got my USCCA just a couple years ago. And so basically, it's almost like they're using the curriculum to sell insurance. And when I say they're pandering to Black people, most of their marketing that they do is to Black people. They have a certain, demographic that they're clearly interested in. And I think it comes from the fact that most Black people see the NRA as a white racist organization, and the USCCA clearly picked up on that and said, no, we are for you Black people. We love you guys. And, kudos to them, because that's what it's about.
It's
right?
a good move.
They're marketing, right. It's a smart move. But that's it. So I tell people I don't have any issue with the product. It's all the same thing. I just think they market it better and they charge a little bit more for it.
Yeah. I mean, you got to pay for those marketing campaigns.
As far as their curriculum, I don't think their curriculum is thorough, especially when you talk about self-defense. And just from a safety perspective, I had issues with some of the things that the TC shared with us, from just a option of having loaded firearms in the class when you talk about a concealed carry class that you're going to be using gun handling. Yeah, so basically she explained that it's not written that you can or cannot. They leave it up to the instructor if they want to allow people to conceal carry in the class. And that's an issue when you have a class where you're going to be handling firearms and doing dry reps. So certain things like that. And like I said, the curriculum looked like it was pieced together. It doesn't look like a fluid curriculum. Like you can clearly look at the NRA's curriculum and see their primary focus is safety.
Yeah,
right?
well, they have that track record to really help them out.
It's clearly easy to see that. Can't really tell, like the USCCA boasts self-defense and concealed carry. Well, that curriculum doesn't really look like a gunfighter curriculum. It doesn't really look like it's going to prepare you to fight with the gun. It just takes a lot of generally understood concepts and puts it into a presentation.
That's really interesting. On that topic of like pandering to the Black community and things like that, I've seen in the last few months specifically just kind of diving deeper into what it means to be a Black man in a world of guns. And the two-way communities and how we kind of section ourselves off a little bit, or how we've been sectioned off, whether it be by choice or by some sort of hook or crook or whatever. I wonder, just in a sense that at one point I marketed this show as being pro-Black because, I'm for Black people. And in another way, I've kind of almost reimagined that term just because a lot of stuff gets picked up with it into being promoting Black excellence and Black empowerment, just as a softer blanket term so people don't get confused. And I wonder, just as somebody who is incredibly for the people, and if people can't figure that out yet, they haven't been listening. Maybe they fast forwarded and just got here. You're late. Can we talk about pro-Blackness in the world of 2A and just kind of your approach to it?
Absolutely. Well, I'll start off by saying I consider myself to be pro-Black. My definition of pro-Black is where you prioritize the Black community and that you seek to put us in a position of empowerment. Mm-hmm. And when I say that I'm pro-Black, and a lot of people have an issue with that. So that's a personal description of my perspective, right? But when I say that I'm pro-Black, what I mean is that my priority is putting my people in a better position because I understand that we're systematically oppressed. And with that being said, I'm pro-Black. And so what does it mean to be pro-Black? That means I put my community, my people first. Like that is my priority. And when I'm done and we're uplifted and we're in a good space, then I can go and try to help other people if they need. But I can't help anyone else. It's like your house, okay? You have to feed your family first. You can't go offer the neighbor's food and your family's starving. And we always want to go offer the neighbor's food. And so I don't have any issue with the neighbors eating, but we don't have no food in the cabinet. So sorry, no, you can't have any of our food. And a big part of being pro-Black with me understands that what's the foundation of the community? Family, right? So if you are not starting a Black family, as a Black man that will be with a Black woman, then I struggle to see how you can be pro-Black. And for me, I don't take issue with who people choose to love. It's a personal preference and a personal perspective. To be pro-Black means to strengthen and empower our community. Community starts with the family. So if you don't have a Black woman by your side, you cannot be pro-Black. You can't really strengthen a community because you're not going to provide the perspective of Black love and the Black family. And that's the foundation. And so that's important for me. And this is something that people debate all day, and people get upset and feel some type of way about it. At the end of the day, I ask people, why do you take issue with that? Why do you take issue with me being for my people first? Especially since we're the ones that need the most help, right? It's not like we're on top, we're running the world. It's like, why you focus on helping Black people like they're winning all over the globe? So it's like, why do you want to help your oppressed people? Like, I don't understand that. It's actually a very fascinating concept. I had a white supremacist approach one of the sisters in our gun club about the name of my organization, and he said something to the effect of, I like what he's doing, but I don't like the name. You can't be more obvious than that. What issue do you have with the name? Not armed movement, clearly. You have an issue with the name Black. And, when people take issue with it, then I know I'm doing something right. Because if you're not moving people in a better position, your people specifically. So with white supremacy, they either seek to control or destroy it. If they can't control it, they're going to try to destroy it. That's kind of the nature of the white supremacist. They're going to control and prosper from it, or they're going to destroy it. Yeah, AKA it's Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street, they couldn't control it, they couldn't prosper from it, burn it down. That's the mentality of the system, which is why it's been so successful. It's a very finely tuned system. It works flawlessly, and it's pretty efficient. But you got to understand it to be able to counter it. And so that's one of those things that I understand. You have to build up the Black family in order to put Black people in a better position to be and that's pro-Black. It's as simple as that. And then when it comes to the Second Amendment or the 2A community, so I'm not really a gun guy. I'm pro self-defense. Like, if you get your job done with nunchucks or ninja stars or broom or bat, whatever the case may be, I'm all for that. I just prefer a pistol. So I'm not necessarily a gun guy. I'm a self-defense person. I believe in self-defense by any means necessary. And I prefer a pistol because I like how I operate with it. I like its efficiency.
Fair enough.
As far as the Black 2A community, I think that we need to understand the difference between being pro-Black in a positive way and being pro-Black in a toxic way. Okay? And
you're going to have to get into that one.
Yeah. I've been getting feedback about this. Like, I have some of the sisters in my space that tell me that I should interact more and get out more and interact with people. And for me, it's like, I don't do this to be social. I'm interested in networking and training with people who take this as serious as myself. And those are the people that I want to rock with. Like, I met a guy from NAGA, Doug, this weekend at this combative pistol class. And I can rock with that. Like, I met you at a gun class that I'm taking that clearly I respect and think to support. And so I think we tend to move in social movements as opposed to the focus of the movement. And you have a lot of socializing going on in the Black 2A community. And I ain't really looking for no friends. I'm looking to network and build with people. I'm a tribal person, so I'm looking to build my tribe. And if you're not part of my tribe and you can't be part of my tribe, then I have no interest in interacting with you. And so I think that we need to get away from the social desire or the social aspect of what we're doing and focus on the work that we need to be doing. And when you focus on the work, you'll get away from certain things in terms of supporting or doing something with someone just because they're Black, as opposed to they're good at what they do. And that's what I struggle with. I don't want to go and network and do anything with people because they're Black. I want to do it with them because they're doing the right things and they're Black.
Wow. You see, that's interesting, because I wonder if people, including myself, I'm going to put myself in this, see certain people, see their skin color and say, oh, they're Black. Let me help them out. Oh, they're promoting this, or they're doing this, or they want to do this, they want to hop on this. Well, they're Black, so let's just do it. Versus they're actually very good, or they know what they're talking about, and they're worth people's time, because people's time is so valuable. Even people getting to this point in the show or the podcast, whatever you're listening to, I appreciate y'all letting us borrow your time. You can't get it back. So letting us have that time so that we can teach you something, or so maybe there's something gleaned from this. Hopefully it's good. And so I think that is interesting, because there's a lot of people I've come across who I'm not very impressed by. It's not an insult to anybody. I'm just not. And for some people, maybe I felt a little bit of obligation, like, he's one of us. Let me give him the time of day, even though I'm not actually impressed.
Right. And that's a big thing. And I struggle with that. Mm-hmm. And what really made that simple for me was, I mentioned the principles of Ma'at earlier. And it's one of those things that's about balance and order and reciprocity. Like they have to be reciprocating. You supporting them has to be reciprocated by them providing quality. And so if they're not providing quality, then there's no balance. Then we're out of order. Then we shouldn't be supporting them. And so it kind of makes things simple. Like if you're thorough, if you're on top of your game, I want to get with you. I want to try to do something to either help you move forward, because Armed Black Movement started as just reposting a lot of people's pages, right? So a lot of people that you see who have kind of blown up in this space, a lot of them got a lot of attention because I was reposting their stuff. And I've never really sought to get any type of notoriety about it, because that was the purpose of my page. And so it was like, okay, I did something that was actually successful. And so with that being said, I noticed that I started to see things that I was like, am I okay with putting this out there?
That's
because
hard.
When I put it out there, people take it as, oh, he kind of signed off on this. This must be good.
Yeah.
So it's like, damn. And so I kind of stopped reposting stuff for a while. And now I'm to the point to where I don't repost a lot, especially on my feed, because number one, it's like, okay, how do I choose? Whose stuff do I choose to post? So now I really just focus on keeping a message consistent. And when I see something that will allow me to drive my message into someone else's page, regardless of whose it is, I'll repost it. And so that's the struggle, because when you repost stuff, you're basically signing off on it. Right. And so I struggle with that from an ethics perspective, because I started to see stuff like, not necessarily with the post that I post, but go on that page and I see some stuff like ooh, can't be doing that.
I've been there. I've been even with just posting a meme or a joke or something like that, where I might see like, oh man, that's hilarious. That applies to me and what I've been talking about. And then you might check out the page and they're supporting something that's just so off the wall, or it's just so lunatics, and you're like,
right.
Should I even
it's
share
about
this?
Accountability.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that it's okay to hold each other accountable.
You're right.
I actually kind of talked about this on the live. Like me telling you, like, hey man, like that wasn't, like that content was misleading. I don't necessarily think that's the message you want to put out there. Mm-hmm. I should be able to reach out to a brother and have that conversation with him, not have the responsibility, oh, you just trying to tear a black man down. We have to hold each other accountable. Like if you're going to be pro-black and you're seeking to protect the black community, then you have to hold people accountable who aren't necessarily moving the best way for the community. And that includes putting out bad content, because it's not like we're selling ice water here, to where if you're selling your ice water isn't good, it's not going to harm anybody. We're teaching life-saving skills. And so if you are being misleading, some people are misleading from an ignorant perspective. They just don't know. But some people are consciously misleading people. I see the majority of people just don't know what they don't know. It's like, wow.
You're right.
Most people don't know, but you do have people who know better, but still don't do better. And that's who I take the most issue with, because it's like, you know better, but now you're just scamming the people. Call that the preacher syndrome. You got a lot of black 2A preachers out there. They just in the pulpit Sunday to get that money.
Mm-hmm. The rest of the week, they're not about it like that. They don't know what they're talking about. And even though they know what they're talking about, half the time they're not really being consistent. I actually saw a pretty prominent 2A, a black 2A group reposting and sharing a few different things. And I started to notice that a lot of the information they were putting out just weird. Like, oh yeah, that's interesting, but I noticed that the picture you posted was somebody being actually a little bit unsafe with the firearm. okay,
Right.
maybe that just slipped by. Maybe you didn't see it. Or they posted something and in the description they're talking about, oh, X, Y, and Z, you can't do this, you should do this, you shouldn't do these things. It's like, well, anybody from beginner on up, not necessarily beginner, like somewhere in the middle on up will tell you that this information's wrong. Who's running your social media? Like, who's making these decisions? Are you ignorant or just like, is this negligence or completely willful? What is going on? So definitely, I appreciate you, specifically you, taking the time to say like, hey, you know, I want to reshare these people's stuff, but I can't always associate myself with things that aren't in line with my principles. So I can definitely respect you being a man of
I'm big on principles. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the black 2A community, I think where we are right now is I think we're starting to understand the direction we need to go in. It's like first step was getting black people to accept the fact that they should be owning a gun. That was like 2 years ago. And I think we're at the point where I think every black person knows that they should probably be investing in a firearm and training in some way, shape, or form. I think we're there. Now it's getting people to understand the importance of training and what quality training looks like and the commitment that's required to it. And so I think that is where we're at right now in terms of the need. And that need starts with the instructors, which is why, you know, me personally, I spend a lot of time refining my craft as a student, which directly contributes to my skill set as an instructor, because it's an ongoing thing. And that's where we are right now. We're getting people to start to finally understand what training looks like and what's needed, but we're at the very early stages of that.
Yeah, I know we're talking about basically embracing self-defense and the importance of that. And like, what are some things that we can do to better embrace it? And can we just talk about really just the importance of doing that? I mean, I know we've touched on it here and there, but if we could just kind of put a bow on it.
No, I think it's simple. It has to be part of your family life, right? Self-defense isn't something that dad does. It's not something that mom does. Self-defense is something that everybody has to actively contribute to. And I think we need to understand that as parents and start our families off that way. And then it becomes cultural. You know, my son will be 9 soon and my daughter is 6. But when my son was about 3, I started to give him kind of bits and pieces of information and then essentially tasks that is now contributing to him being just completely self-aware of his, and aware in general of his surroundings and kind of self-defense minded. So what I did initially was I gave him a job, right? So when I was strapping him in his car seat, I said, your job is to look over my shoulders, left and right, and let me know if there's anybody in the parking lot on foot or on car that could potentially be approaching the vehicle. And for him, it was like, wow, like dad's gave me a job and he felt important and he took that job serious. And that developed into him just being instinctively aware of his surroundings at all times, where he knows what neighbors drives what cars, who's home at what time, and oh wow, what's her car doing here? She must didn't have to go to work today. Like that stuff he says now. And he's very self-aware. He notices everything. You know, he knows everything around him. And I do the same things with my daughter. And so as they get older, the tasks get more involved and they become more involved in the forward of the self-defense. It has to become cultural. And it's not just about violence and guns. It's just overall, you know, when you talk about the plan, like they need to know where the fire extinguishers are in the house. They need to know how to get out of the house. They need to know, you know, where to go if something happens. If somebody does break in the house, where do we all retreat to? The family has to approach this together, because one person having this information in the house with 5 people,
it's useless.
It's useless. Just
completely.
like you, and it's the same thing. So self-defense is the overall concept. Firearms is what we use for violent encounters. Fire extinguishers is what we use for fires. And so there's many different tools that go into defending yourself, and your family has to be an active participant as a whole.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because you talked about your son becoming a part of that plan and kind of embracing that as his responsibility, because we all have to take responsibility for our own self-defense. We are our first we are first and sometimes only first responder until we call somebody else to come clean up what happened or to help us out if we are injured. And that's unfortunately a likely scenario. People do talk about us being more likely to have to use medical training than actually use a firearm. Do you touch on medical training at all with your program, or have you gotten to that point yet?
I don't teach it myself. I discuss it as, again, part of your toolkit. I do have a sister named Tammy from Heart Changers Training. She does first aid, CPR, stop the bleeding. She'll be teaching that in some of my classes. So basically, I'll be partnering up with her.
That's
so
awesome.
Yes, I am certified as a student. So I'm certified to render first aid, CPR, stop the bleed to someone. But I don't teach it. I'm not an instructor. I believe that it's probably a more critical skill set than the gun, because if there's a violent encounter, you're going to need medical.
Yeah,
guaranteed. So it's a really critical skill set, and it's not just about violence. You could be in a car accident, you could be in a biking accident, and still have the need for one of those disciplines. So I think it's a necessity. I don't think you have the option of being someone who carries a firearm for self-defense and don't have that training. Just as I don't think that you have the option of being a parent and be someone that does not have that training, because you have children, you have people that you're responsible for. Yeah. So you have to have that medical training, firearm owner or not. As a family member, as somebody who is responsible for you, taking care of yourself and your family, you should have that training.
Wow, that's important. And I'm glad that you said that, because a lot of people, they really just think about like, oh, it's 2A, or oh, Trump's in office, or oh, COVID and pandemic, BLM protests or riots or whatever is happening directly in front of them, and they say like, I got to get a gun, or now that you have a gun, it's just sitting in your closet, or you don't even have ammo. I've met somebody who said, and this is not a knock against them, they're just kind of a novice. Yeah, I have a gun, but I haven't been able to find ammo anywhere, which is a problem into itself.
Right.
And it goes beyond just let me get a gun. It's let me get a gun and let me look into and actually execute. Let me get some medical training. Let me actually get some proficiency behind this gun. If you've never shot your firearm, or if you're not familiar with it, how dare you think that you can use it in a self-defense encounter? How dare you think that you can actually effectually stop a threat if you've never actually trained with it, and you're not constantly training with it and constantly tuning yourself to get better? So I'm definitely super thankful that we got a chance to have this conversation. You definitely did not disappoint. Folks who said, "Oh yeah, Al-Bal, he's gonna drop it."
I'm an open book, man. I'm an open book.
I appreciate that.
The problem is I'm too open and honest sometimes, so people don't like to hear my truth.
Yeah. I mean, you did say some stuff. You did say some stuff that I'm sure is going to offend some people, and there's two camps that I would put people in. Certain things, if it bothers you, if it hurts you, just check your heart. Make sure, does it apply to me, or am I just taking something personally? So just check your heart. And also, some things are people's opinions based on things that they've experienced, things that they know, things that they feel, and that's okay. Like, that's okay too. Like we don't have to get mad or try to cancel people or destroy people just because we don't like something that they said. It's not necessary. That's what costly conversations kind of get into every once in a while. Right. So hopefully y'all still rock with us.
Did we get to all the questions? I know there was some questions out there.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and hit some of the audience questions, and then we'll wrap up and let you get back to life, because I know you do a little bit more than just talking to me, right?
Absolutely.
All right. I know you know you're tired, so let's go ahead and wrap up. And so one of the questions that we had from one of the guests on Instagram left a question for you. He said, what would you do differently in regards to purchasing your first firearm, based on what you know now?
Oh, that's easy. I would take a class first.
Yeah?
Like I bought my first firearm based on caliber, hip hop, 40 caliber, right? Mm-hmm. And finish, it was a stainless steel slide from the movies. So like TV and hip hop is not what we should be using to purchase guns. So I would take a class first. I would educate myself first. The first 3 guns I bought, I don't own anymore. because they weren't good guns for me. I bought them because of the way they looked and characteristics that I sought after that were irrelevant. So educate myself is the way I would answer that question. Absolutely.
That's a great point. What are your thoughts on consulting a new shooter when they're making their first purchase for a CCW handgun?
Well, in terms of making a selection, taking a class.
So I guess just take that class.
My class is a good class for that because of how I teach it. We start with basic pistol. Most people who come to my class with a gun that they bought that they haven't trained with or don't have any training, like, hey, I bought a gun and today's going to be the first day I shoot it because I want to get my concealed carry permit. I'm taking your class. Most people, I would say 9.5 out of 10 leave the class not liking the gun. Mm-hmm. Once they understand fundamentals and they get to shoot some, quality guns, they don't like their gun. So,
what kind of guns do you bring to the class?
I have a combination. I have a few Glocks, I have a few SIGs, and a few Walthers that I bring. And I let people shoot them. Yeah. And so like it's usually people come with a tiny gun. Like I bought this really tiny gun because I want to conceal carry. I'm like, great, you are definitely going to be able to conceal that gun. Absolutely. But there's a lot of other stuff you're not going to like that, the way you do, the way you perform with the gun. But conceal, you definitely conceal that gun.
Do you see a lot of $200 guns like Skies and whatnot?
I see a lot of Skies. I see a lot of, actually, I haven't seen as many Skies as I once saw. I see a lot of Taurus now, and I haven't had any functional issues with Taurus. I just didn't like how they were engineered when I had one, so I got rid of it. But never really had any performance issues with it. Guns are like cars, man. It's preference. It's preference. A lot of stuff is just a matter of what you like and what's important to you, which is why I don't recommend guns to people. I just recommend you just shoot as many as you can.
Yeah.
Educate yourself, and that way you know what you're looking at and you know how to assess what you want for yourself.
No, that's actually a fantastic point. I'm glad you said that. And
hopefully people can listen to that. I would have them take a class. Yeah, I would take a class and run them through the class, and they can have some perspective.
Now, I know we touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can go ahead and just drive this one home. Do you approach teaching white people differently than you would Black individuals? And do you feel like the name of your organization deters other groups from reaching out to you?
Okay, that's a lot. I got ADD. We're going to break that down, right? So okay. Do I teach white students any different than Black students? The immediate answer is no. I do not teach from a fundamental perspective a white student different than a Black student. But now if I'm trying to drive home some sort of burden of responsibility or how you may need to maneuver, the fact of the matter is white people don't have to maneuver the way we have to maneuver. We have some pretty fundamental differences with like how we interact with law enforcement. And so I can have a white person and a Black person in my class for concealed carry and give both of them the perspective that they need without it being a racially uncomfortable situation because of just how I teach my classes. So no, I don't teach them any different, but I do have to make the point that there's a difference to how you may have to approach a situation based on who you are, what you may deal with. Just as Absolutely. I will give a woman different perspective than a man because she's going to encounter and have to approach and deal with situations different than a man. So it's kind of along those lines.
Yeah, I think sometimes people get really uncomfortable with statements or just the way you even frame that because in our world, everyone is equal. Nobody's different except when they are.
Right,
except
exactly.
when things play out differently. And
right.
It's hard, and I hope people can just sit on that and digest that a little bit and take what you're saying for what you're actually saying.
And then the second part of help me with the second part.
Yes, sir. And that is, do you feel like the name of your organization deters certain people? I know there was at least one, but do you feel like it's a lot of folks?
I would have to say, I don't know, because if it deters them and they don't reach out, I wouldn't know. I will tell you what I do know. I do know that the name makes some people comfortable, and I'm glad it's supposed to. If the name makes you uncomfortable, it's for a reason, and you need to think about what that reason is. Okay, I chose the name specifically to do two things: to jolt people, like, oh wow, like armed Black people, what's going on? Yeah, to kind of alarm people, but then for Black people to feel like something that they could direct at. armed black is something to feel proud of. So it was meant to be controversial. Okay, it was meant to be an attention grabber. I wasn't trying to fly under the radar with this name. Clearly, Carmen is calling it the armed black movement. But I definitely was intentional about not creating the wrong message. I didn't want people to think that I was the second attempt at the Black Panthers. No, this is an educational empowerment that I'm trying to deliver. It's not about, trying to create a militia. It's about educating us so that we understand how we should be moving out here. That's it. It's education based. And so I don't really get caught up in a lot of politics in terms of giving my opinion or letting that drive my page, because it's not what the page is about. It's about education. And so I love it when people ask me about the name and do I think I deter people. It's because people are uncomfortable with the reality of the system that we operate within. So if you have an issue with the name Armed Black Movement, then you need to ask yourself, why do you have an issue with that name? Especially if you can look at my page and clearly see that my page is I think my page has quality content on it. So you look at my page and see the quality content and you have an issue with the name, then you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself, what's your issue? The issue isn't with my organization. You have an issue within yourself. And so I'm okay with that. And I also feel like that's none of my business. I really don't care what people think, especially if they're not contributing to the movement by helping us move it forward or being a part of the movement. They're irrelevant. So I say all that to say, it is what it is, but it was purposeful. The name was purposeful. It was meant to be an attention grabber.
All right. Well, I definitely appreciate that answer. This one was left by a fellow instructor. What are your top 3 tips for teaching students?
I think that we need to understand, so when you say top 3 tips, I don't really have like a list of tips,
Sure.
But as an instructor, I think what I would tell you most importantly is to be committed as a student. Be committed as a student of the craft, and it will make being an instructor a lot more fluid. I'm not going to say easy, but it will make it a lot more fluid. Be committed as a student of the craft. Be committed to master the craft as a student, okay? And not just to be mediocre and teach. Be committed to mastering the craft as a student, okay? And the third tip I would say, understanding your responsibility and your obligation to your student, okay? A lot of instructors impart theories, ideologies, philosophies, and I think you have an obligation to your student to give them an objective perspective that they can take from and utilize themselves without programming them with something because you like it. Okay. So
like that, yeah.
That's what I would kind of impart. You have to be committed as a student, I get frustrated because I don't get to take class. Like I've been looking forward to this class for months because I don't get to take classes as much as I would like to, because I would much rather be in the seat as a student than standing in front of the class, because I love to learn, especially this. So when I get to take classes, like I'm super excited. So be committed to mastering the craft as a student for yourself. You have to, and it will make you a more efficient instructor. Absolutely.
That's solid. That's solid. Last question, I promise. So
No,
this
good,
one
man.
actually, flows from, in a lot of ways, from your answer, and from something we talked about a little bit earlier when it came to the CCW class that you teach, which I actually think should be the model nationwide. If there must be a CCW, it should be something like this. And the question is, should the training to obtain a CCW permit be more extensive or technical? I feel like I know your answer, but I suppose if there was a nationwide standard, do you feel like it should be more extensive and technical?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it should be extensively technical. So I think that, and again, I draw the analogy of a car. It's almost like it's the same process. Like the driver's test you take to get your license does not prepare you to be on the road. No. Like in no way, shape, or form. And most of the concealed carry classes are that way. I believe there should be a standard. What I do not believe we should be forced to take a class or pay a fee to get a concealed carry permit. I believe that if we're upstanding citizens and we legally purchase a firearm, I believe we should be able to carry that firearm. Do I agree that it's a good idea to carry the gun without training? Absolutely not. But when you talk about adding barriers to entry for a right, we find ourselves in a potentially oppressed position. And I think that's the issue. I don't believe that you should be forced from a legal perspective to do certain things, but I think that you should definitely take the training because it's necessary. So it's battling what people should be doing with infringing on rights. I think that's the situation we find ourselves in. It's like we know people should be doing something. Let's make it a law so that they have to do it. And that's kind of what I disagree with. Yeah, I think we should find a way to put some sort of incentive in for them to do it. Something like if you take a concealed carry, just like with the driving program, if you want to get points off your license, you go and take a defensive driving class and you get points off your license. If you want to get your concealed carry permit, okay, we're not going to make you take a class. But if you go take a class, you get $1,000 tax credit when you get taxed. Or you get this, incentivize it. And that way you don't have to be oppressive in doing that. And people, I know I go take a class to get $1,000 tax credit.
Shoot, I would too.
Exactly.
Why would you not?
And then the states can help too by making the class be free. Like if you think it's important, provide the class at no cost to the taxpayers. Right. So they don't want solutions, and that's what I was actually on a radio show here in Delaware last week, WDEL, and I was telling the guys they're not interested in solutions. Solutions for stuff that we deal with is very simple. We have some basic needs in life, and so we deal with a lot of stuff that can be resolved simply, but they're not interested in solutions. They just want to keep certain things going.
This question is from me. This isn't one of the audience questions. And I've actually gotten different responses from different instructors who are competent. Do you feel like it should be like shooting a defensive pistol should be an elective in like schools or high school or things like that? Or should that be available for students?
See, I have to answer this question as a parent now, right? So I'm thinking. I do believe that you should have as an elective the ability to learn about a firearm. Mm-hmm. Where I struggle with just giving a flat out yes to your question is, I believe at that age, I believe guns should be fun and be for sport. So I don't like when I teach kids, I don't talk about them using a gun to shoot people. We talk about fundamentals, accuracy, and competition. I don't believe that you should have a 12-year-old, 13-year-old using or taking defensive gun classes. And that's just my perspective. I believe having it in the sports arena, which in most of the schools that had firearms, that's the capacity that they were there in the sports capacity. Mm-hmm. They still get all the critical fundamentals. And when they become an adult, it's like, okay, now you can use this to defend yourself. And these are some of the differences in approach to learning how to be proficient in using it for self-defense as opposed to accuracy. So I do believe that you should have an elective to learn about firearms. But the defensive part is why I struggle with certain age groups, because I just like them to focus on the fundamentals of the tool, get to some fun activities and some competition so that the tool is fun, because competition doesn't focus any less on safety. The most important aspect when you're introducing people to firearms is safety. And competition is big on safety. And so I like the competition. I don't really think that we need to be teaching 11, 12-year-olds about, shots to the mask on a person. That's that's definitely the father in you coming out, because I'm thinking the same thing. I'm just like, man, would I want to teach my little girl how to take a life? Like, that just seems, My son will be 9. He's been shooting for almost 2.5 years.
Oh, and that's awesome.
Although he understands self-defense, we don't really talk about him using a gun to shoot someone. It's all target and competition and just having fun with them right now. So
that's fair. That's fair enough. Wow. Thank you so much. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping, then we're going to get out of here. Okay. Al, how can people find you for either your business or your page or however?
Okay. So you can find me a couple places. I'm on Instagram, Armed Black Movement, armed_black_movement. That's my personal page. It's the movement. Then I have Civilian Self-Defense Concepts and Principles. That's also on Instagram. You actually can get to my business page from my bio on Armed Black Movement.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I have a website where I sell these t-shirts, armedblackgear.com, t-shirts and patches. If you're looking for training, you go to civilianself-defense.com. That's my training page, my company. You can see we have open classes, intro to pistol, concealed carry for the state of Delaware, concealed carry fundamentals, and I have kids classes. I don't have any open kids classes on the calendar right now, I don't think, but we'll get some on it for October, November. And private one-on-one lessons, but that's where you can find the classes. You can reach out to me on either the platforms, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you can get the contact info. Phone call, text, email, I'm pretty accessible. Any questions that you have, feel free to reach out to me, but those are the places that you can reach. I appreciate you having me on the show, brother.
Absolutely, man. It's my pleasure having you on. Just a quick note to everybody who's watching or listening, whether it be a YouTube or podcast or wherever, go ahead and check the description or the show notes to find the links to Armed Black Movement and the website and all that stuff. It's going to be down there. But also, please go ahead and drop a like on the video or however you found this. Go ahead and leave a comment. Tell them what you're thinking, or if you have a question for me or however you want to do it, just drop something down there. It always helps. And of course, there'll be links down below for how you can support the show, support Al, all that stuff, purchasing stuff, using codes, all that stuff is there. Thank you so much for watching or listening. This has been Costly Conversations. Al, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, man.